Here we're going to talk about some of the researchers in science on how we viewed the brain across time. This is an incomplete history just to bring you all up to speed. We'll touch on some of the major scientists, but I've left out many others. And this will be the only time that I really ask you to pay attention to the contributions of particular researchers. So let's dig in. We've historically used different analogies to think about the brain, and they've usually correspond to the newest technology of the time. Today we think of brains as computers, but back in the 1600s, we thought of brains as other types of machines. Earlier than that, they were mechanical fountains or something similar. This is demonstrated by a quote here that says, "The brain being indeed a machine, we must not hope to find its artifice through other ways than those which are used to find the artifice of the other machines. It thus remains to do what we would do for any other machine. I mean to dismantle it piece by piece and to consider what these can do separately and together." This nicely shows the enduring interest of the brain, what it does, and how we might go about studying it. But a large part of prehistory and history indicates that we didn't originally think of the brain as being all that important. It was thought that the heart was the major player here. We see this today through persistent phrases like "learn by the heart" or "I am heartbroken" or "heartfelt." The heart was definitely front and center and thought to be where thoughts and feelings were kept. And you can see this through writings in different eras, from Sanskrit hymns to Old Testaments and to the Aztecs even. There were early thinkers, though, to suggest that the brain was responsible. Alcmaeon, I think is how you pronounce the name, in the 5th century BCE, was the first to suggest that the brain was the seat of thoughts and emotions. But in large part, that opinion was in the minority. Aristotle was confident in saying, of course, the brain is not responsible for any of the sensations at all. The correct view is that the seat and the source of sensation is the region of the heart. And I mean, at the time, who wasn't going to listen to Aristotle? But slowly over time, these views started to change. This was in large part kickstarted by actual experimentation and human dissection. Egypt was one of the first places to allow dissection of human bodies. Egyptian anatomists were able to describe parts of the brain and trace different nerves that guided movements from muscles and different behaviors. More and more of these kinds of experimentations just showed that it was really the brain that was in charge and not the heart. But the debate still just kind of raged on because changing worldviews is just hard. It's hard for people to accept. And we can tell that this debate was still kind of a big deal because, of course, there's a Shakespeare quote about it. In The Merchant of Venice, he writes, "Tell me where is fancy bred, or in the heart or in the head." But still, time and science prevails. The Renaissance era was pretty huge for scientific discoveries of a lot of different sorts. I always think this part is pretty neat, but we can see how much and for how long we've been interested in the brain through things like art. In Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel ceiling masterpiece, on the right side here, you can see the outline of a pink brain, and that just kind of shows that the brain was an integral part of life, the mind, and religious beliefs all the way back then in the Renaissance. Okay, so fast forwarding a bit, we're in the 1600s, and it's now a growing consensus that the brain is what houses the mind. Rene Descartes, a French philosopher and scientist in the matter, said it was not worth a serious consideration regarding the heart. Rene Descartes, in addition to being the philosopher he is known today, actually dissected a lot of brains. He was one of the first to consider bodies and brains as machines. Descartes had a very mechanical way of thinking. He likened nerves to pipes in the inner workings of fountains. Muscles and tendons were like the springs, and animal spirits were the water that drove the fountain. He did kind of think that the heart was the source of these mysterious animal spirits, but that they critically flowed through the brain. He had a theory, the Pneumatic Theory of nervous function, to describe the flow of these animal spirits. You can see here in this diagram of reflexes that shows the path of the nerve, but what was driving it was some higher power, some kind of animal spirit. Being the anatomist that he was, Descartes also said that a structure called the pineal gland was the seat between the mind and the body. The pineal gland is a pea-sized structure at the base of the brain that was thought to be unique to humans. He made this observation because when humans had recently passed, Descartes could clearly see this pineal gland structure. But as time passed on in older cadavers, this pineal gland seemed to disappear. So he thought that as evidence that the soul had then left the body. As a side note, what really happens is that over time, water escapes the brain, it becomes dehydrated, and the pineal gland just shrinks up. So it doesn't actually disappear, but Descartes thought it did anyway. So this idea that the mind and body are distinct and separable, which is housed in the pineal gland, is known as dualism. This is the classic mind-brain or mind-body issue that you hear about when you take history courses. We now know that the mind is produced from the brain and that the pineal gland is definitely not the seat of the soul, but it was a pretty radical idea at the time.